Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Shweta Aurora Madan. She is a former Global Director, Talent Acquisition Technology for CBRE and McKesson. Welcome, Shweta.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Pete, for having me here today.
Thanks for being here
and talking to you today.
Absolutely. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been hiring technology for the last 18 years of my life in APAC, EMEA, USA, Canada, Mexico, Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore. I think I have teams in 20 countries, so globally. And in cybersecurity, I've been leading cybersecurity hiring team for the last 5 years. So I understand the issues and the challenges with cybersecurity recruiting specifically.
Very cool.
Excited to be here and talking to you today.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you have quite a bit more experience than I do even. And, I've been recruiting in security about 10 years now, but you've been doing, talent acquisition longer than I have. How have you noticed the market for technology recruiting change over the years? Like, I would imagine you're probably seeing some of the same things that I am these days. It's a much different world than we were in 3 years ago, than we were, 5 years ago. How have you seen that evolve?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride, honestly. Till 2019, everything was like, this is the way it's going to be, the world going to look like. And then 2020 came and COVID changed everything. The technology was like the forefront of everything for us to be connected. And everybody, had started hiring in 2020 late and 2021, making huge teams because technology was really required for us to be connected. And even in 2020, that environment, we were still hiring technology, and we were, I think, in the best times in 2021 in the technology space, and 2022, 2023, even 2023, it's been slow for the last 2 years, and that's our U.S. economy, which is pushing it with the interest rates going up and for the big Fortune 100 companies where I work in, technology is something that we invest in. It's not what we make money for. So, it's a bit slow comparatively to what it was in 2022 and 2021. So, it's a roller coaster. So, as a leader, I have to be so agile all the time to understand, the demands are like, you need like 100 people tomorrow, and then you're like, oh, I don't need what I have. So it's changing, and I'm always in the constant pressure to deliver, because the leaders are absolutely not understanding right now what's happening with the market. And even today, we're not sure about what is going to happen next week, next quarter, 2025, how will the market change in technology? So, hoping for the best, and all the best for everyone who's looking for a job in this market. It's a crazy market out there. The AI is going to change a lot of things for sure in recruiting. And I was talking to somebody before this call, and we were talking about it. Every job you're hiring has 200 to 300 applications right now, and most of them are not, the right people applying, because I've been hearing so many AI bots who are just applying to each and everything on LinkedIn right now. So, everything you see has like 300 applications, and for any TA, it's so difficult to go through 300 applications to find one person who's going to be a fit. So, and I have been looking at a lot of tools, and I was doing a project on AI for my employer. There are a lot of interviewing tools. So, how can you do prompt interviewing? And I've been talking to a lot of employers and consulting with them about how we will be safeguarding as an employer ourselves with all these AI tools, AI interviewing tools, because candidates are using it. You will never know that they're using it. But they'll clear these interviews, but half of the time they have not worked on it. So, so it's going to be a crazy future for sure. And that's what the employers are like. How will we know what kind of things we should put on in our interviews? That we should have the probationary period where we understand if a person comes to work, does he know what he said in an interview or not? So,
Yeah, for sure.
those kind of discussions we are having with in the corporate world, and let's see how it goes. But it's scary for the employers as well as the employees both, because they're both trying to understand what's happening.
Yeah, I think AI governance is on the top of the minds of a lot of people right now. How do we get our arms around this thing that, especially so many executives that, maybe they are a couple generations older than us millennials, they're just not well versed in all of this new technology. How do you help them understand this stuff and not just understand it, but control it? And as it gets, the AI systems get better and better, it becomes more difficult both on the employer side of the equation as well as the candidate side of the equation. I think, applicant tracking systems, though, get a lot of bad press for what people believe it's, auto rejecting people and stuff like that. Have you ever used an ATS that auto rejects people based on keywords?
Okay, so I have been in the industry for the last 18 years. I would have used at least 20 ATS systems. I have never ever seen any ATS rejecting anybody without anybody seeing their resume. So when I get this question and I see a lot of influencers saying that make your resume bot specific and ATS bot specific, and I'm like, that doesn't work like that. Nobody is rejecting your resume and not looking at it. So always counseling people that doesn't exist. What you're seeing, it's like a box where you have resumes collected, and as soon as you apply, your resumes get like a website. They just get like your emails. It just gets like, okay, the first one who will send you a resume will be showing you the first, and then the list gets created, and then you click and open a resume, and then you reject or you say yes. There's no AI way of rejecting anybody without anybody looking at it. So anybody who tells and if you're paying somebody for it, do not pay. That doesn't exist. So save your money. The only thing, what some of these ATS have, like LinkedIn nowadays, what they do is on your skills. So if a job description has like 10 skills, it looks at like which is going to be more preferred people. So if there is 100 people who applied, they can look at like these are like the strongest skill matches from those 100.
So it's like a ranking system.
It's like a ranking system. So these are like the strongest matches. But even that, can just be, and we all tell our people who apply saying that please look at the job description, just ensure that it's a matching and, it's a story about how you will be achieving this on the job description. So, just make that as a story for the recruiter to understand. But there is no way that they are rejecting your resume without even looking at it. There is no system which exists, ATS exists like that.
Yeah, I've done a fair amount of research on this myself, and I did look to see if one such system had existed that has that functionality, and maybe I just hadn't encountered it yet. I haven't been able to find one. I have found some that they claim like AI functionality, but like you said, the most I've found that they can do is rank candidates, but it's still up to the recruiter to go into the database, the list of candidates, and then view each one and assess whether or not they're actually a fit. So I guess that's why I'm a huge proponent of outbound recruiting versus inbound, especially in security where there's so many different technical skills that somebody needs to have. The chances of, like you said, somebody that's well qualified applying to that job posting, even when compared to the thousands of applicants that are applying to that job, you end up getting a ton of noise versus signal, and it's hard to weed through all of that. So any best practices you could share that you've managed your teams on to make sure that you're finding the right fits and maybe not having to ignore a bunch of candidates or ghost a bunch of candidates? Like, How do you deal with all that volume?
Yeah, so passive recruiting, which you just said, and networking really helps very well in this market. To have the relationship in place. But for that, your leader needs to have a vision about what they will need in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, because it's also a growing, evolving market and evolving. Technology. There are changes and nuances every day which gets added, and there is such a threat landscape associated to cyber roles, right, all the time. The security clearances take a lot of time. Um, the people who got out of their education, finished their graduation, and also trained, but they need um, on-job training. So, do we have that much time to train them on doing the right job? Do we have relationship with the right universities? Do we have universities? So one of the things which I have done with all the companies I have worked for, cybersecurity recruiting, is a lot of veteran hiring and having those agencies work with our teams very closely to ensure that first of all they're already cleared, security cleared, so that really adds, and they've done some kind of work and how we can train them, and how our leaders can start working with them. But yeah, if you're looking at the ready-made solution, that takes time, but it's always good to plan. So when I go to a discussion with my leader, I'm always like, okay, what do you need today? What you need in 3 months? What do you need in 6 months? And what you need in 9 months? What if you have to deliver this? How will you deliver it? What's your I should say the right mix of your team? How what's your best team looks like? What are the skill set for that? So that I can work with all these agencies and all these partners of mine in veteran hiring, in college hiring, in and agencies, as well as LinkedIn direct networking, and I can go and start talking to them, understand what we have in the market, and if we do not have, find a way to get them trained.
For sure. Yeah. And I think one thing that security specifically is lacking is training. There's a lot of under-resourced security teams out there. The order of the day seems to be doing more with less. So there's very little appetite, it seems, to hire at the entry level or train up junior folks. Um, I guess, could you build a business case for doing that when a lot of hiring managers might say, I need somebody that can hit the ground running because in my situation I need somebody experienced. Is there ever a situation where you think it makes the most sense to hire somebody junior and train?
Yeah, it makes sense, especially on the cost perspective, because when the in the demand and supply, there are some skills which are very high in demand. It makes all the sense to train them, hire a junior folk, or hire a team of folks, like a team of 10, and put them in the classroom training and train them, because it saves the cost, as well as it's a building for the future. It's a talent build for the future, so it makes all the sense. So I do have build those kind of cases, and it worked beautifully for us, rather than having thinking about whatever available in the market. Yes, it's very important, and as a leader in talent acquisition, it's my job to share the data about if you have to hire somebody in the Dallas area or Charlotte area or any area, and you're looking at in office roles, what the mix of the location looks like, how many people are there in this area, how many are looking for jobs, how many people can we attract. But having said that, so that data is important for us to make a decision. But if I do not have that many people on the ground looking for a job, it makes all the sense if you're opening a new office and you want everybody in-house in the office to train people.
Yeah, and I think the more senior the role, the more the professionals tend to be capable of working remote, and they tend to prefer it. I think sometimes the younger, more junior folks, they do see the value in being on site and absorbing information from somebody firsthand. Then at the same time, you also have I think Gen Z in general expects more remote work. So kind of a double-edged sword there. But I think there's value in that on-site shadowing and personal interaction and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, a lot of people want to work remote, and in this market, it seems that the employers now have more of the leverage or power, or however you want to call it. When there are so many applicants for each job, there's a perception that, hey, we can do whatever we want as the employer. We can make people work on site. We can pay less than we were a couple of years ago. Do you see anything wrong with that approach given the state of the market, or does it make sense from a business perspective?
Yeah, so every company, I think all big companies are looking at in office, like in a hybrid environment, to be in office for 2 to 3 days. And then there are people who don't want to, do that, or they've already relocated to a different city. They don't want to relocate back. The property prices are crazily expensive. The interest rate are so expensive that they cannot do that at this time. So it's just a game of demand and supply. They see that there is demand, and they can look at that from that angle. But I think that will cool down in some time, and there should be a way. I don't mind hybrid work, honestly. If you ask me, I love being in office at least once or twice a week and just meeting people, because that gives you that. You're able to work as well as you be in office, meet your team, and then create a different relationship which you can never create on Zoom or Team or whatever you do. Depends on the work, actually. If it's an individual contributor role, you don't need to deal with anybody, then it makes sense to have somebody remote. But if you're looking at a VP level or a director level person to be sitting remote and the team in office, they will always never have that relationship and that rapport built with them.
That tracks too with the job postings I'm seeing. So when you see a job posting now for a CISO, chances are, 95% of the time it's going to be an on-site role, or at the very minimum hybrid. But I think for certain in-demand skill sets, companies, in order to compete for those people with those skill sets, they are needing to offer remote. So I'm thinking like DevSecOps or application security, or maybe cloud security, OT security, which generally involves a lot of travel based on the type of work. But I think the more in demand the skill set, the more leverage the employee has, and thus the more likely they are to be remote. But I totally agree. I think it's going to go back the other direction. We'll see more remote whenever the shoe is on the other foot and the economy gets a little bit better. I'd say we're probably a couple of years away from that. But then you also have to figure that corporate leases are still a thing. Companies are locked into these 10-year leases or whatever it may be, and we have to essentially wait for all of those to run out. Otherwise, if they're still in place, the company's still going to look for justification to bring people into the office. What are some of the, I guess, types of security roles that you manage teams for recruiting for?
Yeah, everything what a CISO hires. So, everything, working with my CISO very, very closely and understanding his vision, and then working with a team to ensure that we are deploying everything what they need.
Were there any skill sets, security specifically, that you found the most challenging to fill?
Yeah, I think anything in security is difficult, other than GRC and those which have a lot of demand nowadays. But everything else has been difficult to find the right person. There are a lot of people in the market, but finding the right fit is always a challenge, even in the crowded market. So it's always, and I was saying that you see 200 250 applications, but only 5 of them fit. So
Mhm.
it's always challenging. Also, finding the right interviewing capacity. Are we interviewing right? Is something which I've been always talking to my security teams. Are we interviewing right? Are we asking the right questions? And what I've seen, especially in this area, is because of the sensitivity and the things and the trustworthiness, you have to be extra careful with the kind of person you are hiring.
For sure. Do you find that the teams that you've worked with, and the reason I ask this is on multiple occasions on this podcast, I would say the majority of the hiring managers I've talked to, they tend to talk so much when they talk about their ideal candidates. They talk about soft skills, intangible traits, thirst for knowledge, communication skills, things like that. Ironically, they don't talk about the technical skills, which is usually everything we see on the job description. It's all technical, tangible types of skills that we can easily assess and are often listed on a resume. Do you find that the hiring managers care more about the technical skills or the soft skills type stuff or intangibles?
They carry, every interview comes with a different perspective, and there is a big challenge in terms of training them to interview right. So it should be based on the job description. So if you've written the job description which is technical, it should be a technology interview. It cannot be a soft skills interview. So if they're doing it, it's not right, because you will be losing great talent on the table in that case, because you're not interviewing right. So I believe we should firstly train the hiring manager about interviewing right. Whatever you've written, are you capturing that in your interview process? So if you're doing one technology interview, which is only on the technology skills, the other one can be on the soft skills and other things. But it cannot be all three interviews asking the same kind of questions.
Yeah, that's good for sure. Making sure that you're not duplicating efforts.
Yeah. They have to come from a different perspective. So one can look at the strategic vision of a person, the other can look at the technology skills, and the third one can look at how presentable the person is and how trustable the person is. Can they put it on the client? How will they react to certain situations? So so the third interview can take care of that. But all three should be capturing different things.
For sure. Yeah, one thing that comes up often too in the podcast is culture fit and building a cohesive culture. And how do we build a cohesive culture, but that isn't also just an echo chamber? I think that's a constant challenge. Like, how do you hire people that have different ways of thinking and viewing the world, but still maintain a common set of goals for your team, and then obviously, ideally, working towards an overall organizational goal? How do you hire for culture fit when it can be such a hard to define thing?
Okay, I always differ on that one. There is no culture fit. It's always a culture add. You should look at the culture addition to a team. So if a person thinks differently, that's a great thing. You're getting different perspectives.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Because, somebody coming from a different background will give you a different perspective, which you have never thought about. So it's always great to have those in the team and build that. If I had some of the hiring managers, and they were like, if I cannot go in the evening to a bar with this guy, I'm not going to hire them. And I'm like, that's not the way it works. That's not the way it works, right? You like him, you're supposed to look at somebody's skills, what they bring on the table, rather than how better you gel together. That's not the way you're supposed to hire.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I think so much of hiring breaks down often to biases, and to things like me bias is the most common one. Like you said, if it's somebody that has a similar personality to the hiring manager, they could be less technically competent, or have less experience, or whatever it may be. They could be less qualified, but still get the job because the hiring manager just likes their personality more. And one guest I had on, we were talking about how hiring managers say that they're often hiring for communication skills, when I think sometimes, and this guest made this point, is it just that they're hiring extroverts? I think often that does happen. People that are gregarious and bright and bubbly and all these things that impress people, even introverts, when they don't necessarily speak to somebody's ability to do the job. I would say if you're in like a customer facing role, sales or recruiting or marketing or something like that, that extroversion certainly plays a role. But if you're analyzing alerts all day, it probably isn't so necessary, as long as you have a baseline level of communication skills. Any other biases that you've encountered over the years?
Yeah, a lot of them. Age bias. There is always that. Of course, the white and a black and a brown, and of course that's a bias, and we do. create trainings for them, for the hiring manager, ensure that they take it every 3 months to ensure that they do not have it. We do a lot of times, the blind resume thing. We do not put, the name on that, and just ask them to interview without that. So we've done a lot of things just to ensure that they just look at the person's overall personality and the skills rather than looking at all of that. But does it happen? Yes, it happens. as a TA, I ensure that it should not happen, and my job is to train them and retrain them so that it's minimal, but it should not happen. And that's what I always tell my team and the people who are hiring, that look for additions. Do not look for what you are. You're already there in the organization. Your ideas are there. Why should you look at somebody who just looks like you, who behaves like you, whose ideas are like you? So think beyond, and that's my job, to give them more perspectives and make them think beyond what they're thinking. Because most of the hiring managers come up with like, okay, I work here, I have 4 competitors, so find me people from these 4 competitors. And I'm like, okay, wait. You can also hire from this company, that company, this company. This is a consulting. You have a lot of options. So look at that, growing your perspective. And that's my job, to open their perspective to it. So
and it makes me think,
sharing more and more data, and help them to tell them more stories about how it will help their organization, and how can they grow.
and it makes me think too, you have to be careful about assumptions. I'm a huge proponent of giving people a chance. I think so much of the talent gap, as we think about it in the security industry, is just about making assumptions about people when you haven't given somebody a chance to interview or actually spoken to that person. So funny, when I was selling cars, they told me one thing. They said, never make assumptions. You'll have a guy that'll walk in the dealership with a brown paper bag and he'll have overalls on caked with mud. And you can't make an assumption about that person. I've had people like that walk in with $100,000 in cash and buy a car outright because they're very successful as a farmer. So I think the same thing applies in talent acquisition and recruiting. We have to be careful about making those assumptions, give everybody a chance, and try to look beyond. Well, analyze your own biases. We all have them, obviously. And I think it's more about mitigating biases, because we're never going to completely eliminate them. Much like, security, it's about mitigating risk. You'll never completely, eliminate risk. How do you, like you mentioned, it's so important for security specifically to make the right hire, because it's risky to make a bad hire. You're handling confidential information and stuff like that. How do you mitigate the risk of a potentially bad hire? Is that something that you've been intentional about, or is it just kind of a byproduct of your processes?
Yeah, with security, we are more vigilant. So we have a longer background check process than the others, because you have to check more into their background. We also do extensive reference check for them to ensure that we're checking their backgrounds properly. Because it as I said, it's so much in the threat landscape that we have to be extra careful.
Yeah,
and which was also very difficult, because if a hiring manager wants a person in 30 days, the background check is taking 3 weeks. So, which is always like, why it's taking so much time? And I'm like, because we have to be more consistent and, ensure that we are checking everything. But at the same time, it takes more time.
Yeah, well, and process is everything in recruiting, in my experience. People often complain about technology, the ATS, the evil robots that are rejecting people. And I always say, the issues you have with recruiting, they're fair. I totally get that you're being ghosted as a job seeker and you're not getting responses, but it's a people and a process problem. It's not a technology problem. It's understaffed recruiting teams. It's, poorly trained recruiters, or just no buy-in from upper management, or maybe the recruiting managers spending too much time tracking metrics that don't matter. Don't get me started on that. But yeah, how do you make sure that your process is effective in being thorough enough to not get the wrong people on board, but also not being too extensive of a process to where you're alienating people that would potentially be a good fit for your company.
Yeah. So, like 5 years back, as a leader, I started something where my recruiter go to an intake. They always carry data with them. So they'll carry the LinkedIn Insight data. They'll carry the hire right data. They'll spend 15 minutes correcting the job descriptions, writing the job description, posting it. The 15 minutes they will spend with the hiring manager, taking them through all the people and the data and one by one. In the last 1.5 years, as we've started using AI to simplify our process, especially sending emails, writing notes, and things like that, we have enough time to be more passive. So I ensure that everybody in the team who goes for an intake takes at least 4 or 5 resumes with them and shows to the hiring manager. So that's actually cutting our time to hire in half, because we already spoken to these people. They're already ready. We know these people. So it actually makes a better, shot. And the hiring manager feels that, oh my goodness, the person's already prepared. The recruiter comes very prepared. And, with the resume saying that this is what you should be looking at. And tell me about your views and, how we can ensure that we have one of the leaders I worked with, and some of the leaders are very much like, we have to finish the hiring process in 1 week. I pushed that a lot, saying that finish the hiring process in 7 days. It should not be more than 3 interviews in 7 days. So try to push it as much as that. But then people's calendar do not match at that time. It takes more time for some people, but we try to push it in 7 days. So 7 days, 3 interviews, and the finalist, ensuring that all TS call them, these 3 or 4 people who have been interviewed, not just send an email, call them and tell them what really went wrong. That's the process which we have worked. We have got our time to fill from 60 days to 36 days now. So that's a big thing in technology hiring. So first the data is really, really important to showcase and have the perspectives cleared out, that this is the market, this is what we're looking, this is our diversity data. Your teams looks like this, it should look like this. These are the kind of people in this market, and this is this kind of slates we can prepare for you. And they will be going through an interview, and this is the week we will be interviewing this. The more planned we are, the better the execution of things.
Yeah, as you were speaking about your process there, I was just thinking, wow, that's a lot of work on the front end. That's research and preparation, and you're doing a lot of legwork before you approach the hiring manager with some potential suggestions. I feel like that doesn't happen that often in recruiting.
It happens. It happens. With corporate recruiting, yes, we have to be more prepared. It's been 5 years as a team. We ensure that we are highly prepared when we go to these discussions. Because if you're not prepared, if I go to any of the C-suite in my leadership and talk to them about unprepared, they won't trust me. They won't trust me. They won't have respect for me. So if you want to find a seat at the table, you need to be more proactive
For sure.
and ensure that you have that data to share.
Yeah, and that actually speaks to some conversations that I've had with CISOs lately, where they're having difficulty getting budget or headcount for their latest initiative. But the ones that have managed to succeed in that area, they come with data and they come with options. They'll present data and options for 3 different courses of action and plot it all out and literally write it all down. Basically, the more prepared you can possibly be, the more things you can get on paper and just show, not tell somebody, but actually show them what you've done, the more likely I think you are to get what you want in the end. How do you attract some of these folks that are very difficult to recruit that maybe aren't out applying for jobs? Like, I feel like 99% of my job is reaching out to passive candidates that have no need to look for a job, because everybody wants to hire somebody from a direct competitor, to your point from earlier. How do you attract those passive folks when they're relatively happy where they're at?
Yeah, there are so many groups right now. There are meetup groups, there are LinkedIn groups, there are Facebook groups for security, which are great ways to just be with them, start talking to them, and just grow the network one by one. So everybody in my team who has been hiring technology, I'm always like, you are supposed to speak to 5 passive people a week, um, minimum. So start talking to people who, not like, you should not open the, not find the umbrella when it rains. You should have the umbrella ready. So you should always keep on talking to people in your industry to find, what's happening, whom they can introduce. So, and whenever you're talking to somebody, you're like, okay, whom do you know? Can I speak to more people like you? And have that network created. Um, that really worked for me in the last so many years. I have been recruiting. I work in huge networks, and it really helps. And that's something which I train my teams. Also, what's our EVP? What's our employer value proposition? How we to sell ourselves to people? Um, what as an employer I stand for, and how I'm going to sell it across. That's the other thing. Everything is stand marketing right now. We're trying to be always there, but how can I be genuine and trying to help people as much as I can? And how my EVP speaks, how my story speaks. Um, is my recruiter trained enough to talk up to you about stories in cybersecurity recruiting, like somebody who joined as an intern and how he became a CISO, or a VP, and I have those success stories, and have I created them, those stories, to go and talk in those first discussions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the more immersed your recruiters are, especially in a niche, it's not really a niche anymore, but in a specialized
It's not niche,
discipline.
but it's still difficult to find the right people.
Yeah. Well, it helps to be able to speak the language, to know all the acronyms, to know where security people hang out. Like any real security recruiter worth their salt these days, they know about the Reddit communities, the Discord channels, all these places where security people hang out that aren't, LinkedIn job postings. There's so meetup groups and B-sides and all the other conferences. There's so much to know in security, and that's one thing. As somebody who's trained a couple of security recruiters myself now, that's one thing I realize is how difficult it is to train somebody to know all of these intangible relationships within the security industry. What motivates people? What are people? What are security professionals' pain points? That's a big part of, I think, your employer branding proposition. Basically, is you have to understand your prospect, your candidate's pain points well enough to be able to speak to those before you've ever even talked to them. Like when I reach out to people, vast majority of people I reach out to, like I said, are passive. I have to figure out, okay, what might that person be looking for in their next career move that they're not getting in their current job, even if they're relatively happy. A lot of times it's a promotion or better work-life balance, or maybe they're having to work hybrid now or on site and they'd prefer to be remote. So, and you get a lot of this stuff just from talking to people. To your point from earlier, the more passive people that your recruiters are engaging with, the more they're going to understand about the field and these intangibles and relationships and terminology. And there's no substitute for immersion in a community, like security. So it's great that you've been so intentional about making sure your people are plugged into the security industry. I think often security professionals get what's the word, sick or sick of or disillusioned with a lot of the recruiting practices out there, because the recruiters just don't understand security. They haven't done any research on the front end. They're just email blasting out to people that aren't fits, and they're not being specific about the people that they're targeting when they're reaching out. They may send an email blast, and the CISO may get a job for a SOC analyst, and that's not a good look. And all of a sudden, you've spoiled your employer brand if you're an internal recruiter, or your your external recruiting firm's brand if you're an external recruiter like me. So, as they say, you really only have one chance to make a first impression. Um, any other thoughts on like how it's important, or how you've gone about educating your recruiters to engage properly with the security community and not, I guess, fall into any of the traps that some other recruiters do?
Yeah. And it's not only cybersecurity, it's across tech because half of the recruiters do not understand technology. And I understand that. So we've started a lot of things. Like one is a technology talk. So where our leaders or our product leaders come and talk to the recruiters about what they're actually making, what kind of work they do every day, what are the different uh, in cybersecurity, what are the different lines and how do they work and what's the economic means and what it is. And but having said that, what I tell my team is if you are in technology recruiting, you have to read. You cannot just somebody was telling me that day, I am finding a difficult person, I'm finding it very difficult to find somebody in full stack. And I was like, do you understand what's full stack? And she's like, no. So I said, then we are not talking till you go and read about it. And that's the same thing in anything, anything in technology. It's like, do you understand what you're hiring for? If you do not understand half of the things on the job description, and you're going to speak to somebody and say yes or no, that's not the conversation I'm asking you to have. It should be much deeper. If you're you know talking to a person, it should be much deep, right? If or anything you're hiring for AI, data science, cybersecurity, anything, you need to understand what a job description is. You need to spend more time with the hiring manager. If you do not understand, sit in those meetings with what he's doing with his team. And if because I have very dedicated recruiters which are like working with different technologies, so they sit in those team meetings, so they get very trained on about what it is, how it's working, what do they need right now, what they will need tomorrow, what they will need after 3 months, 6 months. And if somebody comes to me and say that I do not know this and I'm not ready to learn it, I'm like, you cannot do that. You should leave tech recruiting in, because you have to, because tech, there's something new every day. And you have to learn every day. If you're not ready to do that, do not do tech recruiting.
Yeah, so much of it is just research and reading, like you said, and you
Yeah.
really have to do it on the front end, because if you do it once you start talking to people, it's too late, because then you've already showed them that, hey, I don't understand what you're actually telling me. Because people can tell. They can tell when you just kind of, nod along essentially as they're talking about their day job. I'll be honest with somebody and say, I'm not familiar with that particular thing. Could you go into it deeper? And that's one little, I guess, hack that I would use as a more junior recruiter when I didn't understand something, to get somebody to elaborate. But that's a great way to learn more about the thing that you're recruiting for as you go along. But really, that's too late. Ideally, I guess the problem is you can't know everything when you're doing your research on the front end. Some of this stuff you're going to have to pick up as you go along.
Yeah.
You just have to know that you don't know everything. I think people get frustrated when a recruiter will go into a call with blind confidence and seem like they're very self-assured when they clearly don't understand what the person does. That sort of thing. So much about interacting with security professionals, tech professionals, I think, is knowing what you don't know and approaching the conversation with the right tone. Knowing that you're not a tech professional yourself, that you're there to learn, that this person may have something to teach you. And I think too, especially if you're going to reject somebody, which is always an uncomfortable situation, you really have to have a good reason, I think, for rejecting somebody. And if you don't, people know that as well. They're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I know what my background is. You talk to me, So, but I think a lot of people these days aren't even getting that rejection feedback. Is that something that you've been intentional about with your teams? Getting back to people when they weren't selected.
Yeah, covering your first point, yes. So I always tell my team that, what we do is we educate the hiring manager with the data and opening their perspective to different scenarios and different people they can hire, but to learn what they actually do. So, what the products look like, what their team looks like, what the plan looks like for tomorrow, what are they going to do, so that you understand what they are, what they're looking at, and get trained on it. And we help them with whatever the job market looks like, what's happening, what kind of people we can help them with. And as a resource, they need to trust us. Whenever they need anybody, this is what we need. This is the kind of business challenge we have, and we need to understand and speak their language. As I was telling earlier, that I ensure that whoever has been interviewed need to have a phone call feedback. And we do have debriefs with our hiring managers after the interviews, and we do share very constructive feedbacks with the candidates. I ensure that the 3-4 people who have been interviewed need to receive phone calls rather than just an automatic email from an ATS system that you have not been selected.
That's great that you've been able to do that. I don't know if it's just my experience on LinkedIn or what, but it seems like that level of intentionality in getting back to people is pretty rare. Why do you think more companies, more talent acquisition teams don't make that a priority to get back to people like that?
See, there is something called as what I've been hearing, and I've also faced it in certain situations. There can be legally, people telling you not to do that in a certain way, but there is no, issue in sharing that you have not been selected and they're going with someone else because of we found that this is the right fit. When you get into more details, we have seen that there can be people who are very unhappy with it, and it gets messy at times. So just to ensure that we do not get into that. At times, everybody thinks that, but recruiters are very, very busy people. Every recruiter has like 20-25 jobs to fill, and very demanding hiring managers. And then so many meetings, so many things to do. It's easier to, people just say that, recruiters are not doing their jobs. But coming from a corporate, I understand that they're working so much. They're ready to do everything, but still they are having this backlash always that, they're not doing their jobs. They are doing their jobs. At times you do not get time to pick up the phones and talk to people. It's difficult if you have right earlier, we used to be in technology recruiting, you should have only 15-16 roles, but because of the cost constrained environment, most of the recruiters right now are sitting at 25-30 jobs. Now with that number, it's so difficult catering to so many phone calls a day and giving that feedback and doing very detailed debriefs and things like that. So And I've seen that sourcing teams have been cut down. All the recruiters are doing 360 everything. The scheduling teams have been cut down. So it's difficult for them as well. And they are human beings and good human beings just trying to do their jobs. But they have like 20-25 roles at one point of time and they have deadlines. They have their KRAs, KPIs to meet. And it gets messy at times. So, but having said that, I know I've been always trying that we should be customer obsessed. So it's our stakeholder or the candidates. We should be looking at how we can give them the best service possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, whether you're an internal or external recruiter, like you said, you basically have two clients. It's the hiring manager and then the candidate, and both need to have a good experience, if you're hoping to make a good career match. But yeah, I don't think most people understand how stressful and busy it is to be a recruiter, and like how much volume that folks in recruiting deal with. Like 25 jobs, that's even more than I thought internal recruiters were handling these days. I was thinking maybe 10, 15, but 25 plus is nuts. Yeah, and I'm a super organized person. I think that's part of why I'm able to get back to everybody and stuff like that. But I'm also not working on 25 jobs at a time. So, I think anybody, any human, doesn't matter how how high your IQ is. Any human trying to fill 25 jobs at once is going to be stretched a little thin. And there's only so much you can do. I mean, obviously we can hope that AI is going to fill in some of these gaps, especially when it comes to certain process efficiencies like scheduling, for instance. Calendly for me has been a huge lifesaver. And I'm hoping that we'll get more of these tools that don't replace the human element of recruiting, but that also enable us to do the human element better. Do you see that playing out that way, or do you think it's going to move more in the direction of complete replacement of human recruiters?
It cannot replace uh, anybody, any human interaction, because a human is a human, right? It cannot. You have to give them the right instructions to even write an email for you, right? So, and you have to check, because there can be a lot of mistakes which AI can make all the time. But yes, if it's just an automatic email, or you're spending time, and I've been seeing a lot of tools where, like I'm talking to you. If I'm talking to an interview, every recruiter will take like 20 minutes to write notes. Now there's systems, AI tools, which they can just write notes for you. So it makes your life easier. But it just makes your life easier. So you will be saving some time of your week, and that's that time we are now using for more networking, being more proactive, spending more time on stakeholder management, understanding what your business will need in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and not be reactive. So but nothing changes from the human element, because still we love meeting people in person. Still we love talking to people in person. Uh, and you understand when somebody has written something from their heart, or just use a tool. So you will still have that thing, I think, going on. So nobody's replacing. The AI cannot replace recruiting for sure, but yeah, it can make our lives easier. So it is making our lives easier, and that's why we are trying to ensure that whatever issues we have, how can we be more proactive? How can we more better at our stakeholder management, more customer focused, give more feedbacks to our candidates, plan ahead, be more organized and things like that. But it's not replacing humans for sure.
Yeah, I think ideally it would kind of like the scheduling apps. It's more about saving time.
Scheduling, yeah, which is like easy, which could be just put a time in, and it will just send an automatic meeting request, and people can reschedule if they want to. So that's easy. Like Calendly is super good. And then there are other tools as well which can do that. But or something like note taking, or some interviews have a note taking thing as well, that they will just send a brief about how was the person, what did the kind of questions you asked, and what did the person say. So that's the only advantage. So it saves your time to go and start writing and make notes right now, and then making it fair and write it in an email and send it to the hiring manager. So it just saves that half an hour of your time after every interview.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, the humans in the process would be spending time on those important value add opportunities and situations versus the administrative tasks like writing things down and scheduling and stuff like that. So totally agree. That's where we ought to go. We'll see how it plays out. We're actually coming up on time here, Shweta. So just one last question for you. Is there anything that we're not talking about in the industry and security specifically, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
I think we should be talking about, we do have a lot of universities are having these security courses, but whatever I'm hearing from leaders, but they're still not there. So how can we have better partnerships? Better partnerships, working more closely to ensure that, we really have ready people, who can work for us.
Yeah, that's come up quite a few times where people in school are learning a lot of theory, but they're not learning a lot of hands-on technical skills, and they're also not getting the business professional acting acumen, that sort of thing, to be employable in a business setting. And there's just not enough of those entry level jobs. And a big part of this podcast is figuring out how can we open up more of those entry-level jobs. So a lot of these folks coming out of these programs have somewhere to land. That's a great point, Shweta. I appreciate your time. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do so?
LinkedIn. Yeah, awesome. Please, you can add me on LinkedIn. My name is Shweta Ramadan on LinkedIn. And, if you believe, if you agree, disagree with anything, more than happy to have a discussion. And I'll be more than happy to learn from all of you. So thank you for that.
Sounds good. We'll put your LinkedIn profile up there in the banner somewhere. So appreciate your time, and thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.